He is 15 years old. 15, at an age when most kids are worrying about GCSE mock exams and whether their voice is going to crack in assembly. Vaibhav Sooryavanshi is standing at the non-striker's end at Old Trafford, watching Jofra Archer, genuine, fearsome, 90 miles an hour Jofra Archer, steam in to bowl the fourth ball of his international career. What does the kid do? He doesn't flinch, he doesn't block, he whips it over his shoulder for six. The stadium erupts. Somewhere in the stands, grown men who have watched cricket for decades are shaking their heads in disbelief because what they just witnessed shouldn't be possible. A boy who can't legally drive a car, who probably still has a curfew, has just sent one of the fastest bowlers on the planet into the second tier of the stand like it was throwdowns in the nets. And that, cricket fans, is merely the opening scene of one of the most remarkable days English and Indian cricket has produced in years, a day that ended not with the teenager's name in the headlines, but with a 22-year-old Englishman playing the innings of his life to snatch victory from the jaws of what looked, for a horrible moment, like humiliation. Let's rewind, because this story deserves the full dramatic telling. Vaibhav Sooryavanshi is not some unknown plucked from obscurity for a gimmick. This is a young man who topped the run-scoring charts in this year's Indian Premier League. The most brutal, high-pressure, scrutinised T20 competition on the planet, while barely old enough to sit his own driving theory test. He has been the talk of Indian cricket for the better part of 2 years, a batting prodigy whose highlight reels have been doing laps of the internet since he was barely into his teens. And yet, even with that pedigree, even with that IPL form, India made him wait. The world champions are not a team that hands out international caps like party favours. Sooryavanshi sat and watched from the sidelines as India lost in Ireland, watched as they were beaten in a rain abandoned opener to this very series against England. Patience, it seems, was the price of entry, even for a generational talent. But then came the signs. An hour before the second T20 international at Old Trafford, eagle-eyed fans and journalists spotted him out on the square, shadow batting, going through his shots in that unmistakable, coiled way that talented young cricketers do when they know something big is coming. Sure enough, before the toss, the confirmation arrived, a cap presentation, the kind of ceremonial moment every young cricketer dreams about from the time they can hold a bat. Vaibhav Sooryavanshi was about to become an international cricketer for India. And here's where the story gets its goosebumps. The ground where he was about to make his bow was Old Trafford, Manchester, the very same venue where Sachin Tendulkar, the little master himself, scored his maiden test century as a 17-year-old back in 1990. If you're writing the script for a film about Indian cricket's next great obsession, you could not invent a more poetic setting. And the record he came to break? Sachin Tendulkar's. Tendulkar made his test debut against Pakistan in 1989 at 16 years and 205 days old, a number that has stood practically untouchable for 37 years as the benchmark for youthful audacity in Indian cricket. Sooryavanshi didn't just approach that number, he obliterated it. At 15 years and 99 days old, he became the youngest man ever to represent India in international cricket. Full stop. Let that sink in for a second. Not the youngest to play T20 cricket for India. Not the youngest in a particular format. The youngest period in the history of the nation's cricketing story. Somewhere, you have to imagine, Tendulkar himself was watching with a wry smile, watching the record he'd held since before most of Sooryavansh's teammates were even born, finally being surrendered to a kid barely out of short trousers. So how did the history maker perform now that the cap was on his head and the moment had arrived? In truth, it was a cameo rather than a coronation, but what a cameo. Facing his fourth ball and the first he'd see from Jofra Archer, Sooryavanshi audaciously whipped the fast bowler over his shoulder for six, a shot dripping with the fearless improvisation that made him an IPL sensation. It was the kind of shot that separates the merely talented from the truly special. Most 15-year-olds, most batsmen of any age would be happy just to survive Archer's pace. Sooryavanshi decided to take him on and won emphatically. Not content with humbling one England quick, he turned his attention to another debutant, Josh Tong, and LaRooped him over cow corner for another maximum. 2 sixes off 2 different England bowlers inside his first over of international cricket. If ever there was a statement of intent, this was it. But cricket, as it so often does, had one final twist reserved for the boy wonder. In the 5th over, Sooryavanshi set himself to attack the off-spin of Will Jacks, a bowler who had already shown he wasn't afraid to flight the ball and invite the big shot. Sooryavanshi went for it, but ran past a delivery that stayed a fraction flatter than he expected, and wicketkeeper Ishan Kishan whipped off the bails in a flash. Stumped. Just like that, the innings was over. 14 runs from 10 deliveries, 2 towering sixes, bookending a stumping that brought his celebration crashing down to earth. Sooryavanshi sat on the ground for a moment, head bowed, the adrenaline of the last 20 minutes draining out of him all at once. It's the cruel arithmetic of T20 cricket. Spend 2 balls making headlines, and one moment of overreach can end it all. But make no mistake, nobody who was inside Old Trafford and nobody watching around the cricketing world will remember this match for the manner of his dismissal. They will remember the fearlessness. They will remember the audacity of a 15-year-old taking on international fast bowling on debut and coming out ahead, if only for a fleeting few minutes. Given his age, given his talent, given the hype that already surrounds him, this will not be the last time we discuss Vaibhav Sooryavanshi. If anything, this was simply the opening credits of what promises to be a very long and very loud career. With the youngster back in the pavilion, India's innings settled into a more conventional rhythm, built around contributions rather than fireworks. Ishan Kishan top-scored with a composed 49, Abhishek Sharma chipped in with 43, and the ever-reliable Shreyas Iyer added 37 of his own. It was solid, professional batting, the kind that keeps an innings ticking along nicely without ever quite exploding into something dominant. And that, in truth, was down to England's bowling discipline. Will Jacks and Sam Curran squeezed the middle overs superbly, refusing to let India's dangerous middle order find any real rhythm, with Curran finishing with an excellent 3 for 33. India did manage to wrestle back some momentum late on, plundering 23 runs off the final 7 deliveries to push their total to 190 for 7, a score that on paper looks competitive, but which never quite shook the feeling of being 10 or 15 runs short of a genuinely match-winning total on a ground where big scores have flowed before. And that sets up the second act of this extraordinary Manchester evening, England's chase, and specifically the coming-of-age innings of Jacob Bethell. If Sooryavanchi's story is one of a teenager announcing himself to the world, Bethel's is the story of a young talent who has already been knocking on the door of greatness and finally kicked it clean off its hinges. Remember, this is a ground where England have shown before that big targets aren't beyond them. They piled up 304 here against South Africa last year, and with a strong wind blowing towards a short boundary, the conditions were always going to favour bold, positive batting. But nobody could have predicted quite how dramatic the road to victory would become. The chase started in the worst possible fashion. Phil Salt edged the very first ball of the innings behind the stumps. Jos Buttler followed soon after, clipping to mid-wicket for a golden duck of his own, both wickets falling to the excellent Arshdeep Singh. From 1 for 2, England was staring down the barrel, the crowd's boisterous energy from the Sooryavanshi cameo suddenly replaced by a nervous hush. This is precisely the moment when captains either sink or rise to the occasion, and Harry Brook chose to rise spectacularly. Brook counter-attacked with an innings that felt less like batting and more like an act of defiance. He took Arshdeep apart with 3 successive sixes, a thumping pull shot, a gorgeous textbook on drive, and a whipped flick that very nearly went to hand at fine leg but somehow evaded the fielder. For a few overs, it looked as though Brook alone might simply blitz England out of trouble through sheer force of will, racing to 39 off just 15 balls. But India, sensing danger, turned to spin to break the momentum, and it worked. Attempting to sweep the excellent Axar Patel, Brook got a faint glove down the leg side, and Kishan, the same man who'd stumped Sooryavanshi earlier, snaffled a superb low catch, confirmed only after a nervy review. England were 3 down inside 5 overs, still a daunting 140 runs adrift of their target. It was exactly the kind of position that, against a team boasting Jasprit Bumrah, would have felt close to fatal. But India did not have Bumrah in this match, and that mattered. Enter Jacob Bethell and Tom Banton, 2 young Englishmen entirely unfazed by the mountain in front of them. Rather than panicking, they simply played the situation with a calm that belied the circumstances. Working the Indian spinners around with intelligence, refusing to let the required rate spiral out of control, rebuilding through a stand of 67 that quietly, steadily dragged England back into the contest. Banton eventually fell for 39, nailing 1 straight to point off Arshdeep, and Jacks departed not long after, but by then the platform had been built. And Bethl was only just getting started. What followed in the closing overs was some of the most destructive, clean hitting you will see in this format all year. England needed 49 off the final 4 overs, still, on paper, a stretch too far for most sides in most circumstances. Then Bethl decided to take aim at Ravi Bishnoi's leg spin, and the carnage that followed will live long in the memory of everyone who witnessed it. Helped by 2 no balls from Bishnoi in the 17th over, Bethl hammered the first free hit over cow corner for 6. The second free hit was swatted with equal disdain over long on for another maximum, and in case anyone thought that was luck rather than class, he calmly slotted a third 6 over the leg side fence in the very same over. 29 runs came from that single over alone. Bishnoi's 4 overs, by the time the carnage was through, had cost 60 runs, a brutal, unforgiving number for any bowler, let alone one who had looked so threatening earlier in the tournament. Sam Curran fell soon after, holing out in the deep, but the equation had been utterly transformed. England needed just 12 off 14 balls when Jofra Archer strode out to join Bethl at the crease, and with the required rate now firmly under control, there was a sense of inevitability in the air. It was Archer, fittingly, who finished the job, calmly clipping the winning runs from the final ball of the 19th over, sparking wild celebrations among an England side that has needed some good news rather badly of late. And here's where the wider context of this victory becomes so important. This match didn't happen in a vacuum. It came just a week after the seismic news of Ben Stokes' international retirement, and hot on the heels of a Test series defeat to New Zealand that had left English cricket in a genuinely reflective, uncertain mood. The captaincy conversation is still raging, the leadership structure still finding its feet, and there has been a very real sense of a void where Stokes' immense presence used to be. Against that backdrop, this win at Old Trafford means something more than simply 2 points in a 5-match series. It's a reminder that England's next generation, Brook with the bat and now increasingly with the armband, Bethl with a maturity well beyond his 22 years, Banton, Curran, Jacks all contributing, is ready to carry the weight. Bethl, remember, already has previous when it comes to delivering under pressure on the biggest stages. He made a century in a losing cause against India in the T20 World Cup semi-final back in March. This time in front of a raucous Manchester crowd on a night that will be remembered forever for a 15-year-old's audacity. He made sure there would be no repeat of that heartbreak. This time, Jacob Bethell was not going to be denied. So where does this leave the series? England lead 1-0 with 4 matches still to play. And the whole travelling circus now heads south to Trent Bridge for the 3rd T20 on Tuesday, a ground with its own rich recent history in England's cricketing story, not least as the birthplace of the Bazball Revolution back in 2022. India, for their part, will surely be tempted to unleash Sooryavanshi again, eager to see whether that fearless start can be turned into something more substantial next time out. Will the teenager get another chance to torment England's bowlers? Will Bethl and Brook continue their stunning form with the bat? And can England build genuine momentum in this series at a time when the wider narrative around the national team desperately needs a reason for optimism? One thing is for certain, between a 15-year-old sensation rewriting the record books and a 22-year-old finishing the job in style, English and Indian cricket fans alike were given an absolute joy of a contest at Old Trafford, one that will be talked about for years to come. What do you reckon, Boundary Line faithful? Is Vaibhav Sooryavanshi the real deal? A genuine generational talent who's about to take world cricket by storm? And has Jacob Bethell now done enough to nail down that middle order spot for good Stokes retirement or not? Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. I want to hear every bit of your debate on this one. If you enjoyed this breakdown, smash that like button, subscribe to Boundary Line UK if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our coverage as this series and this fascinating new era of England cricket continues to unfold. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you for the next one.